Hey everybody, welcome back to You Are What You Love. I am your host, Marissa Tandon, and today my guest is a podcaster and storyteller whose work you may have heard in an amazing show called But Make It Scary, where she takes romance movies and gets to the core of them by making them horror films. So, please welcome to the podcast, Sequoia Simone.
Hello.
Hello. I'm so excited to be chatting. I think I listened to a little bit of your show and I was like, this is not only really funny, but like exactly true. Like romance movies are. If you look at them on the page, you're like, this is a horror film.
Yeah, at their core, it is a surprisingly easy thing to do, which means that sometimes I really have to stretch myself, you know.
Yeah.
You have to be like, okay, well, every single rom-com could be a stalker slasher scenario, like all of them. So then you really have to push yourself and be like, yeah, but like what if there was a ghost? What if there was a demon? What if there were witches, you know?
I love it. Yeah, it's like the romance is horror enough in itself and you're like, I guess I have to try harder.
Exactly. Yeah, my tagline for that show, my like outline for that show is and remember love is scary.
Mm.
And so I have this thing and I have like merch that says love is scary on it. And I'm like, I don't even think that this has to be even like related to the podcast. I think people just relate to that sentiment.
Right.
They're like, yes, it is.
It's terrifying. Yeah, I absolutely.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for joining me today on our show. On my show. I would love to know what we're talking about today. What is the thing that changed who you are as a person?
Yes. I struggled with this a lot. I had to talk to my friends. I had to talk to several of my friends and just like really break it down. And what we came down to is if you follow the domino effect of my life, what you get to is a Harry Potter musical by Star Kid.
When I was emailing back and forth with you, I was really enjoying it because I love seeing how people take on the question. Because sometimes people jump in and they're like, here it is. This is the thing, 100% easy.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people are like, here's a list of like 4 or 5 things that if you like this one, maybe we'll do it. And then for you, you were like, give me a minute to analyze and speak to everyone that knows me well. Trace it back and get to this very, very niche piece of media. And that's the one.
I did my very best. Well, I made a whole list of things at first where I was like, oh, these are a lot of things that like I liked when I was a kid that kind of influenced the way that, you know, the paradigms through which I viewed the world as a child and a young adult. But none of them, you know, like made me go, you know, to the end of the podcast to be like, what would your life be like without this thing?
Mm.
Every time I took that thing out of my life, I'd be like, yeah, same. Probably same. So I really wanted to find that thing where like, if you took it out, where would she be, folks? Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah. Well, so for people who don't know, because I don't know how big a Harry Potter musical was. I know it made the rounds. I know I was aware of it. But I'm not sure how big it was. So how would you describe a Harry Potter musical?
Yeah, I think that like especially in that era of, you know, online media, YouTube, that kind of a scenario, things were you were starting to get sort of like these micro I mean, what would sort of kind of be called a micro trend now, but not really. These like small little fandoms cropping up around these pieces of media that were being distributed on the internet.
Mm.
So I think that this was like pretty close to the forefront of that kind of an experience. And one thing that strikes me about it is that they have said before that they made a Lord of the Rings one beforehand.
Oh.
They made a Lord of the Rings one, they performed it, people came to see it, they hated it. Lord of the Rings fans were like, "Excuse you? How fucking dare you?" You know? Like,
Yeah.
they were just, like, all up in arms about it, and they were like, "Okay, I guess you can't come for the Lord of the Rings fan base, they hate it." They do Harry Potter musical, and the whole entire Harry Potter fandom was like, "Yes, excuse me, I am absolutely here for this experience. This is the best thing I've ever seen. I would like 12 t-shirts and 12 versions of the soundtrack." And so I think that in terms of like how big was it within the Harry Potter fandom, huge, pervasive.
Yeah.
Um Two regular human beings do not know what that is. Who is she? Never heard of her, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned that it was I think one of the things that was cool about this is that it was just kind of it was a live theater show in Michigan, right? University of Michigan.
Yeah.
Like a group of kids who are college students, they got together and put this together, but then they did put it on YouTube, and that was sort of in that era where things could go. I hate the word viral, but it's like, but where things could
Yeah.
reach outside of that one theater in Michigan and actually reach everybody across the world.
And especially at that time, I feel like a lot of the stuff that was going up was like, you would put something like that on YouTube not in order for it to reach more people, but in order for, like, the cast to have it. And,
Mm,
like, oh, you can show it to your family that, like, wasn't able to come because they were from out of state or whatever, like, stuff that was being posted to YouTube in that same vein of, like, this is a live theater show we did at our college, was there for posterity. It wasn't
right.
there to become viral. So, I think that, it's likely that they had no intention of the thing happening that happened.
Yeah.
Because it's also not a great recording, if we're being really
Yeah.
honest about it.
Yeah, it does sort of look like someone was like, "Hey, do you guys mind recording from, like, row 3 tonight so that my mom can
Yeah.
see it?"
Exactly. The sound is bad. Like, there's, like, actively no reason why this should be as popular as it is. But you know what? I love it, so I'm about it.
Well, I'm curious about how you found it for the first time in that space. Like, how did you see a Harry Potter musical?
Yeah, so it was actually my high school sweetheart sent it to me. When so it
Oh,
came it I think they put it on YouTube either like mid my senior year of high school,
okay.
and I didn't watch it until the summer after my senior year of high school. So it had been sent to me like nearing the like tumultuous end of this high school relationship. Um, and I had been avoiding it because it just, like, brought up a lot for me, just, like, looking at a link that was emailed to me or whatever. I don't know, man. She was a little drama. But I do remember opening it up one day and being like, "Oh, I had forgotten that these links were sent to me. This is something clearly would be super interested in because I love Harry Potter and I'm a theater kid. So I guess I'll watch this. It's the summer. I'm bored. There's nothing to do. All of my friends are like not here. They're like on vacation." And just decided to dive in, and it's really long also,
Yeah.
and I watched it all in one sitting. And there was
Oh,
like
wow.
one computer in the house. It was like nobody else gets to use the computer but me for the next 4.5 hours because this is really important.
Was it like a family computer in, like, a public space? Are you sitting
Oh, yeah. No, that was like straight up in the living room.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I think that's one of those, like, relics of time past that I don't think about, but when you bring it up, it's such a specific image of, like, the
Mhm.
family computer, like, you must be
Family computer.
monitored.
Exactly. Like, my dad wants to know what you're doing on the computer, so
Right.
that has to be in a public space.
Did your parents, like, was your family walking by as you were watching this weird musical in the living room?
I wanna say that my dad wasn't there, but my sister was.
Okay.
And, like, this was definitely I was, 18 and my sister was, like, 14, so my
Mhm.
sister, like, wanted to be doing what I was doing. and, thought that I was very cool and wanted to be doing, "Oh, is she watching the Harry Potter musical?" And I was, like, too cool, so I was like, no, this is my thing, I'm watching it by myself." Um
You're not invited.
You're not invited, this is a really specific to me, even though thousands of people have watched it. Um Yeah.
That's so were you already broken up with this person at the point that they sent
Yes.
it to you? Okay.
No, when they sent it to me, we were in the tumultuous end that only I was aware of. Only I was aware of the tumultuous end. But but I did not revisit this link until later, after we had broken up and the wounds had healed a little bit, and I was able to look at literally anything that reminded me of this
I see.
really very normal, boring relationship in retrospect.
I really love that somehow it's sort of like that shoebox of things you do, like you put away after a relationship. You're like, okay,
Mhm.
6 months later, let me open it up. And you are opening an email to a thing that ends up being something that adjusts your life or like refocuses your life.
Literally changes my life forever. Yeah.
That is so that's such I really like that as like a villain origin story. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I'm a supporting character in your life who's like, she's never gonna open this email, but um
I did.
so summer, this is like, did you end up going to school, like to college right after that? Or is this something that you were kind of obsessing with? What happens right after you watch a Harry
Right.
Potter musical?
Yeah, so, I the domino effect started happening pretty immediately after I watched it, but, I think that one of the big influencing factors to how invested I got, in this thing and then subsequently YouTube and the Harry Potter fandom were it was basically, like, a bunch of my friends were going to college in other places, but a majority of my friends were going to go to college at the same place as me, like a 15-minute drive away from the high school.
Mm.
And I was really disappointed that that's where I was going to college. But, like, in retrospect, girl, you had to do good in high school to go to a different college, my dude. Come on. But, yeah, I was like, "Oh, I guess I'll just go to the high," and, like, the college from the living room that I sat in and watched a Harry Potter musical, 5-minute walking
Oh,
distance.
wow.
Like, it was literally next to my house.
Okay.
Um so it was, like, kind of a bummer, and then all of my friends who were gonna go decided to go live in the dorms, even though
Mm.
we all lived next to the college, basically. It was like, it's a college experience, we're gonna go live in the dorms, and I could not afford to live in the dorms.
Yeah.
I was getting 0 financial support from my parents because they didn't have it, so I was like, "Okay, well, I guess you're gonna all go live in the dorms and, like, hang out with each other and party, party, party," and, like, I could walk up there in, like, 20 minutes, but you're not gonna think to call me
Mm.
because I'm not there. And that is, what happened. Like, not that it was anybody's particular fault that that's how it happened.
Right.
It's just like the people immediately surrounding you are the people you're gonna hang out with all the time. It's just sort of how it is. So I was lonely and sad, and I wanted to find a community when I felt like I had lost mine. And I think that that was kind of like a perfect storm to have me watch this thing and then be like, you know, fandom, creation, these
Mhm.
are things that I need to be a part of.
Yeah, I think something that is interesting about a Harry Potter musical. So I saw a Harry Potter musical because my friends were obsessed with Harry Potter growing up. And
Mhm.
I personally I literally had not read any of the books or seen any of the movies and like maintained that in some sort of weird superiority complex. Don't
Wow.
know why.
Yeah.
Like not even like at the time, there's no reason why I read voraciously as a kid and there was just something about it that I was like, I'm not gonna. I missed it. I missed the
Right.
boat. Now
It's too late,
it's
yeah.
too late. But I'm aware of the context and I've seen a Harry Potter musical. And I think the thing that was interesting to me about it is that they were a lot of it is making fun of it, making fun of the work itself and making fun of the people who like it in a very self-deprecating way. It's very clear that this is not people sort of ragging on people they don't have the same feelings as. Were you deep into Harry Potter at the time, or was this something that kind of was spaced out? Like you were, oh, I like this musical,
Right.
even though I don't understand what they're talking about.
Yeah, I loved Harry Potter, and I think this is, like, a good moment to mention really quickly that even that, like, I am still in the Potter space.
Mhm.
I still have a lot of, feelings about Harry Potter, and J.K. Rowling is a piece of trash person.
Yeah.
Just, like, quick aside. Um, but yeah, I mean, at the time, this was a thing that I had grown up with, and, when I watched a Harry Potter musical, I was 18, and or 17 or 18, and these books had been a part of my childhood in a way that was definitely beyond the things that the rest of my peers were thinking about it. Like my peers liked it a lot, and
Mhm.
like my friends and I would go to like the book release midnight parties at the library and like get the books in our hands at midnight, and then I would go home and sit down and read that whole book and not go to sleep.
Yeah.
And, like, they would go to sleep and then wake up the next morning and start the book. Like, there
Yeah.
was just, like, an extra mile that was being had on my account. Um, and I also, from about I wanna say about 11 or so, had been writing fan fiction.
Okay. For
So
Harry Potter specifically.
for Harry Potter specifically,
Yeah.
yes. So I started writing in, like, my purple fuzzy journal with my purple fuzzy pen when I was 11 years old, um, and had graduated to writing on forums and posting my stuff on fanfiction.net and, like, getting my stories betaed and, like, getting my s getting people on DeviantArt to make, like,
Oh.
banners and stuff for them. I know.
Oh, DeviantArt is a name I have not heard in at least a decade, but it brought me such joy to hear it again.
Just name
Oh my
dropping
god.
DeviantArt.
Just throwing it out there. Um,
Casual.
I do think
Uh,
2 things you said are important to reference, which is, 1, I think on this show, as we talk about media that influenced us, this is not the first time we've had a show or a piece of media that, turns out the creator behind said media is not the best person in the world.
yeah,
Um,
unfortunately, it happens all the time.
all the time, people
Yeah.
are bad people.
Yep.
But I do think it's important to acknowledge it, especially as we're talking about it, even as we're talking about fan works, to say that this is something that we don't agree with. It's not an acceptable way to behave, and we
Yeah.
maintain that. So I do think it's
Yeah.
important to acknowledge it as we go through. But I do also think what you're talking about is a lot of like the excitement and the fan works and the stuff that you created because of something else, or sort of
Right.
scratching that initial creative itch. Um,
Yeah.
and you brought up fan fiction. So as a fan fiction girly myself, I feel we have to speak about it.
Yes. Yes.
Did you hear that fanfiction.net, there was like a hoax? They thought it was going down this week.
I I was ready to have a full breakdown, like a full absolute, like, call in sick to work, like I am grieving
Yeah,
breakdown.
I was like, read it and I was like, this is not real. And then I was like, has someone downloaded the whole website yet? Because that's important to me. I don't know why. I haven't
Right.
opened that website since Archive of Our Own came out, but but I do
But
feel
it's like it is like a lot of stuff has gotten moved onto Archive of Our Own from other websites that have become defunct. So
yeah.
then you sit there and you're like, "Oh, is there enough time for somebody to go in there and get this information so that we can get it transferred?" Because a lot you go into Archive of Our Own and it's like, "Oh, this story was archived from this place by this person on this time. It originally came out blah 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 time or
Yeah.
whatever." So I was like, "Is that gonna happen? Do we have time for that to happen?" And then I had to kinda sit back and be like, "Okay, I don't I don't think this is real."
Yeah, something in me, I have a text message from that day that I sent a friend, and I was like, I just feel like someone who has, like, a degree in library archiving or archival science or something should be dealing with this. Like, I feel I
Right.
feel there should be a speciality of archiving all of the fan fiction from the internet. Which I wonder, as you look back at, like, starting to write when you were 11, and, like, what I don't think I've really asked anybody this when we've talked about it, but, like, what made you go to fanfiction.net for the first time?
That is a really good question. I don't know. I feel like okay. My first Harry Potter fan fiction site was maybe not fanfiction.net, and it was
Mhm.
maybe Checkmated,
Okay.
which was a Ron Hermione specific entire site.
Oh.
And I remember visiting that one a lot, but that no, I know. I'm tracing it, I'm tracing it. So so I joined the Warner Brothers forums
Oh,
when I was, like, 12 or 13,
okay.
I wanna say. And they had, like, a fan fiction portion of the WB forums. Um, and, like, my dad had to, like, sign a permission slip because I was
Oh.
so young, and, like, we had to, like, put a stamp on it and, like, mail it to the WB. It was
Oh
wild.
my gosh.
Um, and I think that from that forum is where I just learned about all the other places where fan fiction existed.
I really love this idea of, like, a permission slip that had to be mailed to
Yeah, we
to
had to
let you onto a
print it
website.
out and
It's
sign it with a pen and mail it.
honestly, maybe we should still be doing that, like, that I think I need a permission slip for certain things on the internet. If I had to really think it through and ask someone to handwrite it, I think I would do less.
Right. Exactly, like, if I had to put in that extra effort, then maybe I just wouldn't most
Right.
of the time.
If I had to
And
really
save
talk to someone
myself a
about
lot,
it, yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Uh,
I think there's something really cool about getting to experience fandom in that part of the internet, like the genesis or not the genesis, the internet existed before this, but sort of like
right.
where when people talk about sort of like Star Trek fandom or fandom that started on fan specific sites or like the WB message boards or things like this, where it's before sort of everyone built these large sites where all of fandom came into one place.
Right. Yeah.
And did you feel like you had to look for a place to talk to people? Like you mentioned your friends were into it, but they weren't the same type of overwhelmed that you were. And so is
Yeah.
that what led you to this website?
I think so. I mean, I just, like I really wanted to always be talking about it.
Mm.
My inclination was to constantly be talking about Harry Potter, so if I was at home and I wasn't with any of my friends who wanted to talk about it, and my dad was like, "Don't talk to me about that." And my sister was like, "Talk to me about it." And I was like, "No."
Oh my goodness.
um then I had to find a place to do that, and I think that that manifested itself at first pretty purely in fan fiction,
Mhm.
and then once I was like in with fan fiction, I started looking at MuggleNet and the Leaky Cauldron. In their early days, I started listening to podcasts. My first Harry Potter podcast, Mugglecast, started coming out when I was like 15 or 16 years old. And that, you like download that and then put it on your iTunes and then plug your iPod into the computer and download it onto the iPod from iTunes.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a whole ordeal to get that podcast in a listenable fashion. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that I got to a point where I wanted to be consuming Harry Potter related content and only Harry Potter related content.
Mhm.
Um, and so finding a space on the internet where people were making that was sort of integral.
Yeah. So then you end up at 18, which at that point was the series over or was it so yeah, it was
Yes.
over at that point. So
Mhm.
you then sit down and watch a Harry Potter musical at perhaps like a very it sounds like about to be lonely and changing part of your life.
Yeah.
And that's sort of to me like watching that musical, it is the same excitement and itch that you were trying to scratch online. You were watching someone do that. Did you
Yeah.
feel like that was part of it? Like, it was a kinship of these people want to talk about this as much as I do?
Yeah, I think so. I think that they did it with just, like, such they were so genuine about the execution of it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what spoke to people like me, people who are Potter fans and like, really hardcore fandom types,
Mhm.
um, is that, like first of all, I think that for the most part, the Harry Potter fandom is not afraid to not like Harry Potter,
Mm.
which is which is, like, a really weird characterization for any fandom,
Yeah.
but, like, generally does not shy away from being like, "No, yeah, that was silly," you
Yeah.
know? Um, so something that lives in a parody space was something that that fandom was just, like, fully prepared to embrace
Mhm.
with open arms in a way that apparently the Lord of the Rings fandom is not prepared for.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that you brought that up because, the Lord of the Rings fandom, we had an episode that we talked about Lord of the Rings on, and that fandom seems like it had this energy of there are rules, we are
Right.
following them, and now you're seeing that same fandom sort of go on the negative side of things with the TV show that's coming out
Right.
and the way they're feeling that rules are being made, or broken, I suppose. Um,
Right.
um,
Yeah, and I did see I think that I had listened to Wizard Rock,
mm,
which is, you know, a combination of things that I love, music and Harry Potter, but I was going into school for acting. I was, like, fully, like, musical theater kid extraordinaire. So seeing the, like, literally the 2 things I love most in the entire world combined into one thing, I was just like, "You can do that?" That's incredible, and, like, the music is really good, and it's really witty and funny, and there are parts of it that didn't age well, and the sequels are not great, and especially have parts of them that don't age well, but, like, in the moment, seeing it made me also really want to be more present in the fandom because I think that, like, you know, talking about, like, listening to podcasts and going to fan sites and stuff like that, I had dropped off that for a couple of years because the books had been done for a couple of years. Like, movies were still coming out, but the books had been done. And I was like, "Oh, I've got this rekindled desire to really be a big part of this fandom."
when you watched it, was there, like, a particular point where you felt that snap of, "Oh my god, I'm so in," like, one of the actors, one of the songs?
Yes. Yes. Literally the moment that Lauren Lopez steps on the stage,
Okay.
that's it for me. It's over for me. Goodbye, me. Um,
R.I.P.
RIP, literally one of the most iconic performances I've ever seen in my entire life. The best Draco Malfoy, hands down. And that's another thing is, like, I was also going into acting school and trying to figure out what it was that I wanted that to look like for me. You know, I loved musical theater. I wanted to be a musical theater person, but, like, I loved comedy so much.
Mhm.
And, like, what does that look like for me in the kinds of stories I wanna be telling and the kinds of things I wanna be doing, and just, like, seeing her, like, rolling around on the stage, I was just like, I that's all I wanna be doing.
Yeah, I think, something that strikes me about that musical and, I think about the actors themselves as well and what they've gone on to do, is that they're having so much fun. Like,
Yes.
there's such a performance level that you're watching and you're like, "Yes, you're performing something, but also you are just having a blast."
Yeah, and I finished it and I was like, Why is there not more of this? Like,
Mm,
I want more of the feeling that I was feeling while I was watching it."
mhm.
And so I th it's ti I'm going off on the domino effect now is what um, So I went to their YouTube page and I was like, I want more of this. Oh, they've done some live performances. I'll just like watch their YouTube videos of their live performances. And I was doing that and I was like, I came upon one of their videos of a live performance at Azcatraz, which was a Harry Potter convention that was held in San Francisco.
Mhm.
And I was like, "I'm sorry, did you say a Harry Potter convention? I can be in this internet space that I love in a real life? Like, that's incredible. That is all I've ever wanted to be and do." So I had, like $500 that I had gotten from high school graduation
Mhm.
that was just sitting there waiting to be spent, and I bought a ticket to the Harry Potter convention happening the next summer. So this was the summer of 2009, so I bought a ticket to the one summer 2010. And I was like, "Okay, now I have a ticket." I don't know. I'm 17 years old. I've never been anywhere by myself. How do you buy a plane ticket? Uh
Does anyone know?
Does anybody know? Yeah. So, like, it was just like I was so hyped that I immediately bought this ticket to this convention and then was like, "What do I do? How do I get there?
Oh my
What
gosh.
what am I doing?"
I'm very interested in the convention experience because it was something that I was always so n- I don't know. I don't want to say nervous. I think it's something I was so like afraid to go to. Not because I didn't
Mm.
think it would be amazing, not because I didn't think these people were just like me and I didn't crave it, but because I think I was like nervous someone would find out, which obviously they would. Like you were gonna go.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's a weird thing to be worried about, but I think I'm actually I just bought my first tickets to go to one for I'm going to a supernatural convention in January. Very excited.
Yay.
But at 17, like so I assume you did figure out how to buy a plane ticket and go and
Yeah, and
attend.
what was wild, so I was like, "Okay, I gotta do all this stuff." I had never had a job before because while I was in high school, I wasn't allowed to have one because, as I sort of shadow mentioned earlier, I was a bad student. I was like, "I'm in 12 clubs. I can't do my homework. I do not have time for that."
Yep.
But so I wasn't allowed to have a job because I was supposed to be focusing on school. So I got this ticket to this convention and then I was like, I have to buy a plane ticket. I have to get a hotel room. I have to do like all this stuff. I need a job. So literally the reason I got my first job was so I
Was
could afford to go to a Harry Potter convention. I worked at that job I got for 8 years.
Oh my god. What job was it?
Yes. I got a job at the spaghetti factory. I don't know if you're familiar with the spaghetti
I
factory,
am familiar with the spaghetti factory.
or as we call it, the spag.
Oh, no. I You know what I just realized I didn't know because as you said, the spaghetti factory, I was like, "Of course, I live in California, the spaghetti factory."
Right.
What part of the country were you in during this whole period of your life?
Oof, yes, I was in Salt Lake City, Utah,
Okay.
baby. Absolutely living it up.
What was I feel like that is a very specific place to grow up. So, what was your experience like in Salt Lake City?
Salt Lake City was a hard place to grow up for a variety of reasons, but mostly because I grew up an atheist in Salt Lake City, Utah, which is just like, I mean, most people know the stereotype of Utah is that it's filled with Mormons, and that is a stereotype for a reason. It is filled with Mormons. So, going through elementary school, having people be like, "What's your address?" Because you think they want to be your friend. They don't want to be your friend. They want to send missionaries to your house. So my parents had to be like, "Stop telling other children your address."
Oh.
You're like, "That's devastating. Thank you."
Oh my god.
But yeah, it's like a very strange place to grow up. And I, by middle school found sort of my crew of kind of weirdo nerd kids. And then I, went to high school in a place that was like a lot more diverse
Mm,
than where I had gone to elementary school, and that was great. There's like one diverse high school in Utah, so I'm
you
glad
found it.
that I end up there. Yeah. And then went to college at the University of Utah in Salt Lake as well. I lived there until 6 months ago.
Mhm.
7 months ago. So it's fresh. It's fresh for me, everybody,
To
okay?
be departing. So did you find that living in or growing up in maybe a not so diverse place that you found diversity in fandom online? Like, online is the whole world. Um,
Right.
was that part of your experience of being able to experience diversity outside of your non-diverse upbringing?
I think actually that's one of the things that I found in fan fiction,
Mm,
specifically, both writing it and reading it, was that, like, that is the and that's a reason one of the reasons why a lot of people end up in that space is that you are trying to sort of see yourself
yeah,
in any place, and in when I started writing fan fiction in, 2001, 2002, I also wasn't seeing me literally anywhere,
yeah,
whether it was on, like, TV or anywhere, you know?
yeah.
So, yeah, fan fiction is definitely a place that you go to find to create diversity in both the fandoms that you love and just your general life.
Yeah, I think, one of the very valid criticisms of Harry Potter is the way it handles or doesn't handle diversity. Um, and so I am interested in this idea that I think it comes up a lot in fantasy as well, like magical universes that for some reason somehow are not diverse at all, or
Yeah.
are diverse in tokenist ways or different things like that. Um,
Mhm.
and wanting to see yourself in that world and finding that online and in fan fiction. Um, Something I talk about with my friends a lot when we're kind of starting to revisit fandoms of high school past is that there are certain things that I thought were part of the show, but they were actually like accepted fan lore that I had spent so much time.
Yes,
Did you find, like, that element of anything where you were part of your experience of the canon itself is the changes that you sought out online?
oh boy. Yeah, a lot. And to the point where I think this is also an apt time to mention that I do also have another podcast where me and my co-host read Harry Potter fan fiction, like the most bonkers stuff we can find from like pre-2007.
Mhm.
So I live in the fan fiction space even more now than I did then.
Yeah.
I it's a joke to take me to Harry Potter trivia, like an actual joke. I don't know what happened in the Harry Potter books. I I only know fanon. I have, there is no distinction for me at all.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I do think, like, it's sort of like a Mandela effect, but for fandom and canon specifically, where you're like, "What do
Mhm.
you mean that didn't happen?" And
Right.
I think especially with something like Harry Potter that was so sprawling and, like you said, the fans were so willing to dislike it,
Mhm.
while still liking it, like, you're able to be critical of it. Um,
Yeah.
there's something I think sometimes the war with Harry Potter becomes the fact that there is so much fan work out there
Mhm.
that almost I don't wanna say overwrites, but becomes like with your relationship, it sounds like more of your relationship was actually with fan works, like a Harry Potter musical and fan fiction and forums and connecting with people. Sounds like that's actually more of your connection to Harry Potter than the books themselves.
Yeah, and, that's sort of why I trace this, domino effect back to a Harry Potter musical, because a Harry Potter musical gave me that in
Mhm,
to the place where I was like, "Oh, I am just a fandom girl, and I the things that I love about Harry Potter are actually not the books at
mhm.
all."
Yeah.
I am grateful for the foundation they gave in order for people to write fan fiction, people to play Wizard Rock, people to write musicals. There's many Harry Potter musicals.
Yeah.
I was in a musical. There's like it all it all comes together in the end, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's and so many podcasts and there's just so much fan created work. And if I just was rereading the books over and over again, I wouldn't still be this person, you
Right.
know.
Yeah. It's like you wouldn't do you think you would have maybe just not cared at a certain point? Like, they would have been like other media you've consumed where it's like, "Oh, I read it. Maybe I read it a couple times. I really cared about it. Now I've sort of moved on with my life."
Yeah, I think that they would live in a similar vein in my brain to, like, The Hunger Games,
Mm,
whereas, like, wow, I really loved those, and, like, yeah, we think sort of critically about them in retrospect, but we we saw the movies and we had love-hate relationships with them,
right.
and that's just sort of, like, it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I think as I've listened to you talk about your experience with it, it's so much more about sort of being in a space where you were craving connection and
Mhm.
continuing to find that connection all the way through now.
And I think that that's that way for a lot of people in the fandom is like you really want to find a connection with other people around this thing that you want to talk about all the time. But you also are, there is a reason why the like very hardcore Harry Potter fandom people
Mhm,
overwhelmingly queer, disabled, like it just is it's a space where, you know, lots of people were looking, like in fan fiction, to find themselves
mhm.
in a thing that they loved, and so they just created that. They were like, "Here's the thing I love, and here I am. I'm literally here
Yeah.
in it."
Do you feel like I think something interesting that you talked about in that is that the people that seem to not and this is a generalization, but the people that you're talking about are people who wouldn't have seen themselves in Harry Potter.
Mhm.
Like, they would not have seen themselves in the text, and it almost seems like some of the fandom or a portion of the fandom is a reaction to that of, "I want to be like, why am I not included in this world?"
Yeah. I think that there's a certain it's almost less like, "Why am I not included in this world?" and, more of like, "I can see myself included in this world."
Mhm.
Like, the world is open enough, and I think that's probably a bit because it's a children's book series.
Sure.
Like, if it was more fleshed out, it might be more difficult, but the world building is fine. So, like so, like, there's just a lot to play with, and I think that there was just a lot of people, including myself, that saw it and went, "Oh, I can see myself that in that place, and I can put myself in that place."
Yeah. Well, looking at that with a Harry Potter musical, something that you mentioned already was that at that point you were already pursuing or planning to pursue a degree in sort of acting. You were a musical theater kid, and that was that
Mhm.
world. Did it feel like meshing those two things where you were just like, okay, now I see how I fit or I see how I mix these two things together?
Yeah, and I think that it says a lot about literally what I do now, which
Mm,
is I live in the Harry Potter space, in a comedy Harry Potter space,
yeah.
and also on, my other show, a parody space.
Yeah.
But just like I struggled a lot with like what comedy was to me, how seriously I wanted to take theater and acting, and then I was a theater studies major for a year, and then I auditioned and got into the actor training program, and I had also auditioned for the musical theater program and did not get into that. And in retrospect, I am like, yes, of course you didn't get in. You are a fine singer. Like there is like you're okay.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And that's fine. You can still love singing around your house. It's cool. But I got in the acting program and I was like, okay, so am I just like a play actor? Do I just, like, go be in plays? Is that
Mhm.
what I wanna do? And I did 1 year in that program and was like, "This is too serious for me." I just want to be making people happy,
Mm.
and I want them to be providing joy to people. And I think that that's something that these people are doing, but these people are also, pretending to be starfish and like and doing like Buto and like all of this crazy theater stuff where I was just like, yeah, that's not really what my vibe is. And then coming off that, I'm like, well, do I do stand up? No, I don't think I really want to do,
Yeah.
like it just, there's trying to figure out what you want to be when you grow up is like the actual worst thing.
Oh, for sure. And I'm so jealous of people who can at least pretend. I don't think anyone has it figured out, but people who can pretend that they have it figured out. I'm like,
Yeah.
how nice for
Yeah.
you. That must be nice.
That looks like a great time for you
It's like I
personally.
don't believe it, but I know that you believe it and you have therefore less stress day to day.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, and I even I mean, I'm my mind is reeling because there's literally there's so much that came out of my sort of reinvigorated passion for the fandom.
Mhm.
Because there was also a moment where I was like, "Oh, maybe I'll abandon, performance and writing and storytelling and all that stuff entirely and go into event management."
Oh.
Because I went to so I went to that Harry Potter convention,
Mhm.
and one of my roommates at the Harry Potter convention was the captain of the Quidditch team at UMass Amherst.
Yes. Okay.
And so I was like, "I'm sorry, did you say Quidditch team?" Um, and when I got home, I immediately had to get involved in this. And so, like, I started the team at the University of Utah. I am terrible at sports. So I was like the team mom, team manager, and then I transitioned into refereeing.
Okay.
And I was a referee for years and a tournament director for years. And I loved tournament directing so much. I was like, maybe this is something that I can sort of just make into a career. Yeah. Yeah. Yet another Harry Potter related thing.
Yeah. Well, and Quidditch is huge. They have like a literal international league that people compete
Yes.
in,
Yes.
which is it's always interesting to me, I think, as someone who didn't have that bug growing up. I when I went to college, they did have a Quidditch team, and people were very intense about it, and we did not have, like I mean, we had sports, but we were an art school. So
Okay.
sports were not like, my friends who were actually on, like, real school-sponsored sports teams with jerseys and and
Right.
and
Yeah.
courts and things, they were like, "Is anyone gonna come to our games?" Like, I remember going to my friend's volleyball game, and, like, the only people in the stands were our friends for her, like,
Oh,
specifically.
no. Oh, no.
That's how much sports were not a thing at our school, but Quidditch was this huge thing, and I remember not getting it, but getting that everyone was having a great time,
Right.
um, and something about that, I think, seems to be overwhelmingly the case with fandom in general.
And that's definitely a space that, when I started doing it, there was a lot of people there that were fandom types and like Star Kid performed at World Cup 6, which I was at. And Harry and the Potters did several of the World Cups. And like they were playing into the fandom space. It is not that anymore, to the point where it's literally not even called Quidditch anymore. It is now called quad ball. Um, but like when I first started there, it was because I found out about it at a Harry Potter convention, and a lot of the people were there because they saw, a flyer or something at their school that was like Quidditch, Harry Potter,
Yeah.
and they were like, "Yeah, I love Harry Potter."
Did you I know you mentioned, like, roommates at the Harry Potter convention. Was
Mhm.
that something that these were people you knew before, or did you, like, seek out other fans going to this convention to share a hotel room with.
Yes, so that was the other thing is that, like, when I was trying to figure out how does one go, how does one travel, by themselves, uh I was looking up on, like, that they had, like, a forum,
Mhm.
and they were like, "Oh, you can go over here and you can find roommates on this, subsection of the forums." I'm like, "Cool."
Cool.
So I went over there, um, found, like, a thread somebody would post and be like, "Oh, I'm getting a room, I'm looking for 3 roommates," and then you'd sort of post a little bio about yourself.
Okay.
So that's how I found roommates, and that is also how I found sort of YouTube stuff in general, because I was going through there and everybody kept being like, oh, I'm 25 and I live in Canada and I'm a nerd fighter and I'm this and this and I'm a nerd fighter and I'm this and this and I'm a nerd fighter." And I was like, "What the heck is a nerd fighter?" And so I went to Google and I typed in nerd fighter and I found the Vlog Brothers on YouTube and I was hooked immediately.
My body did the same thing when you said Nerdfighter that it did when you said DeviantArt earlier.
I have a DFTBA tattoo.
Oh my god, do you really?
I do. I
Oh,
do.
I
Yes.
love that. I the Vlog Brothers are such a specific and I don't know why I'm talking about them like they've gone. They're still doing very well
Oh
for
yeah. Oh yeah.
themselves. But that specific time is such a clear memory and such a clear, like, point on the timeline to me
Mhm.
of, like, what was going on in society and in fandom at the time. Um,
Yeah.
but I also when you bring up DFTBA, like, that actually I remember feeling like that was maybe one of the first times people were saying, like, it's cool to be nerdy. There was, like, this sort of
Yeah.
big face on it, like, John Green was well known, like, he was writing books, like, he's actually, I think, the first person in memory that I can think of that was a successful mainstream respected person that also was, being sort of an idiot online, right?
Yeah.
And I
Uh,
I hate to use it so bluntly, but I think I know I think about this, and I don't know if everybody else feels the same way, but growing up and, like, hitting that point where you go from high school to college, and when you think, like, "Oh, I wanna do something in the creative field," you start to feel like, "Can I publicly also be a fan of things? Can I be taken seriously while being ridiculous?"
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think John Green was one of the first or not I can't say he's the only person who's ever done it, but he's one of the first people I can remember that was like, "Absolutely, I have these very well-known books that win awards, and also I'm gonna do crazy stuff on the internet."
Right, right. Yeah, I'm gonna eat this, like, blended hamburger from McDonald's on the internet, and also
And also my book is gonna win. I think it has one of those, I can see the cover of Looking for Alaska in my brain, and there's
yeah,
that
and you
little
can see the
symbol.
little it's yeah, and I just
Don't know which one it was, but I know
it
it's
was
an
one of
award.
them. It's one of the ones where you get the little gold star,
Yeah,
so
they're like, "Buy it." This is art. Uh,
Yeah,
um, yeah, do you feel I'm interested one of the things you talked about a little bit is sort of what your relationship with comedy was at the time and what it's become now. Do
yeah,
you I think comedy is such it's one of those things that we kind of go, is that a career? Like, is that
right.
acceptable?" Do you No, it's not.
Right.
Not a career, not acceptable, be serious. Um, but do you feel like watching kind of a Harry Potter musical, watching, Lauren Lopez, watching the Vlog Brothers, all of them sort of say, "Yes, comedy is something that you can do as a thing." Like, it's not just being funny or unattainable, and it's also not
Right.
just stand-up, like you said. Do I wanna do stand-up?
Yeah.
No. Um, how did that sort of influence your relationship with comedy?
Yeah, I think, YouTube played a certain part of that, just, like I I am always a proponent of, when people say, like, the internet is evil or whatever,
Okay.
I'm like, my I know that this is, like, seemingly going off into a weird place.
Strong.
Um, I'm like, here's the thing. We have been given these platforms where, like, creation, um, doesn't have to live in the same spaces anymore, and it
Mm,
doesn't have to follow the same guidelines anymore. So I think that, like, when I was in high school, I'm like, "Oh, I can be an actress and be funny," or, I was, like, on the TV crew, and I was like, I could make a movie
mm,
and be funny or whatever, but, like, all of those things are really big when
yeah.
you think about them, especially when you're a kid. You're like, "Oh, that is sort of like a huge unattainable, goal or experience." And then you're introduced to, YouTube or, doing a show at the black box, taping it and putting it on YouTube, um, and, like, these platforms give you different ways to create things that you didn't have before.
Mm,
And, like, even now with stuff like TikTok, I'm like, there are people doing things on TikTok that you couldn't do
mhm,
that before.
yeah,
Um, and they're really funny and really talented and great, and, like, this is just not a format that ever would have flown
yeah, yeah.
before.
I like listening as you were saying that, like, it was I can do this and be funny. There wasn't something that maybe before YouTube or before I guess, yeah, YouTube in general, that's where you would have seen a Harry Potter musical and the Vlogbrothers and everyone else
Mhm.
that was in that space. There wasn't a just be funny before
Right.
that
Yeah.
that wasn't sort of like again, maybe the same spaces that you have the problem with seeing yourself in of stand-up, of improv, like,
Yeah.
I think it's hard, as someone who has done stand-up quite a bit and done improv as well, it was something that I think looking back on it growing up, I can't think of even now where I talk about like, "Oh, these are the people that made me wanna do comedy." It's rarely someone that you're like, "This is also someone who shares my point of view." Um or,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
I can look back and say, like, "Oh, yeah, like like, Dane Cook was a gateway drug, Bo Burnham was, like, funny, and I wanted to be funny." But I can't you don't think maybe necessarily like, "Oh, like, this person" there are so many, Black female comedians that you can pick out of a lineup and be like, "Ah, yes, there's such a surplus of them doing well." Like,
Right. Yeah.
um, uh
Yeah.
but I think something you're talking about with, like, YouTube and TikTok and, podcasting in general too, like,
Mhm.
there is more of an accessibility of people being able to see people who look like them or come from the same backgrounds of them or share a point of view that
Yeah.
are being funny. Like,
Yeah.
do you think YouTube was maybe the first generation of that to some degree?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, like, a lot of the platforms that have come since, you refer back to YouTube as kind of source material
Mm,
on how something like that can or should function or shouldn't function. Um and I also think that, like, on the sort of accessibility uh platform, like, another thing about Salt Lake City, Utah is, like, where's the opportunities?
mm,
Where are the opportunities? And I know plenty of people who are pursuing comedy in Salt Lake City, Utah. It's not like
sure.
it's a thing you can't do. It's just there's a significant difference between the amount of opportunities in a place like Salt Lake and the amount of opportunities in a place like New York.
Absolutely.
So I think when you have these online platforms, all of a sudden you're totally opening this space up to being like, it doesn't matter where you live. You can make a funny video and it can reach 2 million people and make them laugh, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think TikTok in particular and YouTube, I think YouTube really is this, like, bed of first with that, and I wonder how much it impacted people growing up in places that you wouldn't have thought about those spaces. I mean, for yourself, like Salt Lake City perhaps is not the place where a ton of kids are like, man, you know what
It's
I'm
not
going to do?
the comedy capital of the United States, Salt Lake
Someone is
City?
going to write in and be like, actually, these 12 comedians that are a really big deal came from Salt Lake City. So
How dare you not know that?
I'm so sorry. My college actually does have a degree in comedy that you can get, which is funny in
Nice.
itself. It's a joke in itself that you can
It's
get
a
a
joke.
degree in comedy. But the even bigger joke is that I qualified for the minor, but not the year that I graduated like the year that it wasn't allowed. Like I took all like
no. No.
They were like, "Ma'am, technically you should have a comedy minor. But you know you
but
really
joke's
shouldn't,
on you.
right?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I do it's so ridiculous. I think so much about that. Like there's so many things that you do need to go to school for and so many things that they're really
Like,
printing
maybe
on.
you don't. Yeah.
Just like,
They're really
it's like,
trying to get your
man.
money to go to the school, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I said I spent 2 years in theater, and then I left. I got a mass communications degree. I was like, I need something that is usable in the real world,
Mm.
and then didn't use it. So,
So-
I guess joke's on me.
You're using that theater and comedies.
Exactly. Like we did a whole thing. But when I transferred, I was like, oh, now I'm getting a bachelor's of sciences. And they were like, okay, that means you have to have X amount of art credits. And I was like, great, that should be fine. I just spent 2 years in the theater department. And they were like, well, none of those classes technically transfer onto these specific. So I
Stop.
had to go take, I kid you not, acting 1 for non-majors.
Oh my God.
So that I could freaking graduate. The rest of the kids in the class were like honestly pissed that I was there.
Yeah, you
They
just
were
spent
like, you don't
like a ringer. Like
Yeah, exactly.
you are bucking up the curve.
Exactly. And I was like, I'm sorry. I just want to graduate.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I do think back on those things. Like I'm very grateful for my college degree and my college experience and everything. Absolutely. And all of those things. But then I also do think about the fact that I paid for a class that I took all semester, which was Stand Up 101. And again, I took it on a dare. I enjoyed myself. Obviously, enjoyed myself enough that I've continued to do it for the rest of my life.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
So it's a good thing, and college is good for certain people and everything like that. But I do think back on the fact that like our final was we did a stand-up routine. Like that's not real. That's not a thing that
that could not have possibly happened.
Yeah, it's like that's unacceptable. And also like the audience themselves, we did it in this like I went to college in Boston, and we actually went to like a very historical comedy spot that like all of these comedy greats have been in, and it's in Cambridge, and it's like the top of a Chinese food restaurant.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and then on top of that, so like you can like smell Chinese food like coming up, but then
Incredible.
the audience incredibly drunk because they're and I was like, I don't even think I was 21. I would have been 19 or 20 when I took that class, and I'm like doing my first 5 minutes with like a group of my class was all guys and me, and then the audience was all drunk people like from Boston.
Oh my God. That sounds like it could go really like either really well or really badly.
Yeah, I can't remember it being horrible. It just was one of those things where like you look back on it and you're like, oh, I guess that happened. Like
I guess that was something that I did. Great.
Yeah. So
you said Boston, you said Quidditch, you said a comedy.
Oh, are you gonna guess where I went to school? I'm excited.
Emerson.
Yes.
Okay.
I did, in fact, graduate from Emerson College.
Great. I was like, I'm putting it all together.
Yeah, yep. It was that's where I went. You can it's like a find the, like a Where's Waldo, but Gave you enough clues.
Exactly, and I got there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Oh,
funny.
man. So, after our long tangent about
Yeah.
comedy and performance in general, I do wonder kind of about maybe acceptance in this space and the fact that you've stayed there as long as you have. Like, I wouldn't say that you've made a career out of Harry Potter, but I would say that you've made a space for yourself in fandom specifically. Is acceptance in fandom something that you feel like is maybe one of the core pillars to some degree?
Yeah. Yes. I feel like there are so few spaces in the world where I feel 100% comfortable.
Mm,
And, that's for a variety of reasons, but what those reasons are kind of irrelevant in this fandom space because I've always felt 100% comfortable
mm,
in the space. And not only comfortable, but there's like a feeling that is there that I don't leave because I can't find it anywhere else. I mean, the sort of pinnacle of that feeling to me is the last song of a Harry and the Potters concert. It's like unbridled, childlike joy. And I don't think that adults are get enough leeway to experience a feeling like that
yeah.
in their regular everyday lives. And so it's beautiful. Like, it sounds so cheesy to say, but it is. And there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it
Yeah.
anywhere else. So, I think sort of the longevity to that is that feeling of being 100% accepted and feeling like the people around you also feel that way is really nice. And then I think that I have to a certain extent like being in the Harry Potter space isn't my career, but I have my career because of being in the Harry Potter space
Mhm,
and, creating the show that's still going on that I've been creating for 5 years and, going from finding out through a Harry Potter musical that Harry Potter conventions exist,
mhm.
going to my first one and being like, "This is what I wanna be doing forever." Going to my second one and getting to be in a musical version of the last 200 pages of Deathly Hallows, called The Final Battle, which was really wonderful. To now where in two weeks, about 2.5 weeks, I am a special guest. I am appearing at a Harry Potter convention
Oh, wow.
as talent, which is like sort of the wildest version to me of like how this could have gone?
I feel like the one thing I would regret not asking you about is I think some of the people that came out of a Harry Potter musical then went on to have these huge careers that perhaps had their own troublesome fandoms. And and this is my long-winded way of asking you whether or not you followed Darren Criss to Glee.
You betcha I did. I followed Darren Criss wherever Darren Criss went. I followed Darren Criss currently wherever Darren Criss goes. Um, I Glee. Glee was rough. Glee was really rough, but I was so excited, and so were all the people who love Star Kid. We're
Mhm.
just, like, so excited to be like, "This is success.
Yeah,
This is success happening to a person that is, like, immensely talented, who we care about a lot."
yeah.
Um, and, it's unfortunate that that is what it had to be. But I loved it at the time.
Yeah,
Like, to be fair, I loved it at the time, and I loved his character, and I loved Glee,
yeah.
and I went through a rewatch a couple of years ago.
Okay.
It's terrible. It's so bad. It's so problematic and horrific and
Horrible.
just,
Yeah.
like, absolutely one of the worst things that you can subject your personal self to, but it did I think without Glee, Darren we wouldn't have Emmy-winning Darren Criss on, the, what was American Crime Story or
Oh,
whatever it
yes.
was that
Did
he
he
was
win
on
an
that
Emmy
he
for
won the
that? Good
Emmy.
for
He
him.
won an Emmy for that.
I did
He was
not know
very
that.
good in it.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
do remember watching it. I just, and also, again, only because Darren Criss was in it. That wasn't
Yeah.
a show that appealed to me. But I was like, I do like that boy. So, that
Yeah.
man. I think Glee is one of those that you talk about where, like, if you have to go back to it, like, the fandom did not make you maintain it. You watched it while it was
Right.
happening. It was one of those that, like, did get to a point where you were like, I can stop watching this and I don't
Yeah.
have to finish it. I don't know how it ends, and that's okay with me.
Yep. Yep.
But it is sort of this, like, wild thing that happened because I think it's one of the bigger people I can think of that came from some sort of niche, as you said, like,
Right.
poorly recorded, like, awkward, bad sound. They were like, "That guy's got talent. He's a shining star."
Yeah.
And it sort of is that sort of, like, power of the internet. Like, you see it a lot more with TikTok now, where they're sort of just
Yes.
plucking random people who are,
Oh, they're getting them.
you know?
Yeah.
But that's one of the first that I can think of that went from sort of just
Yeah.
yeah, right?
I honestly can't think of somebody from before that who gained the amount of
Yeah.
yeah.
The only thing I can think of is, like, Bo Burnham. I don't know
Right.
why I put such a long space in between. I was
Bo,
like, Bo, my friend Burnham, the celebrity.
Bo, for show, yeah,
You know?
yeah, yeah.
The greatest rapper ever. But that's the only other person, and that really was, like, individual comedy content that went to individual comedy career,
Right.
whereas Darren was sort of group fan content that then brought
Right.
him on, right? Um,
Yeah.
but I think it's interesting of how much of a fan base he had from fan content. Like, it wasn't, it is something that you've talked a lot about, the fandom of it all and the experience of being a part of fandom, and it is sort of an example I can think of someone going from being a very visible fan to being a celebrity in and of himself, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's fun because we all sort of get to, like, root for him,
Yeah.
in, like a, "Oh, he's Harry Potter to us,"
Mm.
kind of a way that feels like, I don't know, like, very genuine and endearing. So they performed at a Harry Potter convention that I was at, and I got to meet them, and that was really fun. We were, like, dancing, and for a long time, this was, like, my thing where I was like, I am funny, and I know that I'm funny. You wanna know why? Because I was at a LeakyCon, and I was dancing, and I did something funny on the dance floor, and I didn't realize that Lauren Lopez was, like, right behind me, and she laughed. She thought it was funny, so therefore, I am funny. Thank you, everyone, for coming to my TED Talk. Like, I was so about that story for a large chunk of my life. And then I did go see them. So they did, like, a 10-year reunion show, in LA, and they got Darren to come do it, and that was wild because you're like, this is like this is at that point, Emmy award-winning Darren Criss.
Right.
Yeah, going back, as it were, to Hogwarts. Gotta get back to school. Yeah, as it were.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and that was wild too because they got, the girl who originally played Hermione, I think was gone by the third one, a different person played Hermione. They got her to come back for it, and she was, like, pregnant. She's, like, on stage singing, like, fully pregnant, and came out for it and did it anyway, and it was really cool, but, like, seeing Darren Criss back in that space after the fact was, like, very wild and cool.
Yeah. Was that at the El Rey? across the
I
street
think
from.
so.
So I saw Star Kid at the El Rey one time, um, and it was at the point in my life that I had not seen a Harry Potter musical and was not part
Oh.
of the Potter group, but it was like one of those things where all my friends were going, and they were like, "Should we go?" And I was like, "I mean, I guess, like,
Yeah.
I guess I'll attend." And I do remember even as someone who uh, did not go what was going on, it wasn't like a very Potter musical performance, it was
Right.
like a Star Kid performance. I don't believe Darren was there, but Joey Richter
Mhm.
was there, and I had been aware of him at that point because he had done like maybe like a Disney Channel show at that point. He was doing some stuff that was
Right.
well known, and I had seen Star Kid's other stuff. Like,
Right.
I remember watching Me and My Dick actually very, like, poignantly, because I was like, "Oh, these guys are having fun." Like,
Right.
you know,
They're always having fun, yeah.
yeah, it's like, this is scratching, like, my 14-year-old comedy sensibilities. Like, a large man did dress up like a penis, that's working. That's working for me. Um, but they did, like, a sketch show, and they did, like, original comedy, and a lot of it now I still remember, and I was like, I didn't like, they did like, a Taylor Swift joke, and they did some, different sketches like that, where I was like, I don't know that this ages well, but
Right.
I do know everybody here is having a great time, and I actually think it was maybe one of the first times I had seen comedy with a group that had that sort of magic that you see in improv teams,
Yeah.
where they knew each other so well that it was
Yeah.
just they knew exactly what they were doing. But I do remember the whole El Rey, like, that whole theater of people feeling like you were a part of something, even though I personally was not. Like, I personally didn't belong in that group, but even
Right.
not knowing it, you could still feel that energy of
Yeah.
yeah. And they were so nice. We did they had a there is a I don't know if it's still there, but there's a Harry Potter store across the street, and they did
Okay.
their little, like, fan meet and greet sign ticket things
Nice.
after. I don't remember who it was, but someone complimented my nail polish. So it sounds like they're good at compliments, this group of
Yeah.
group of
And I think
performers.
that, like, honestly, like, if you're gonna be the kind of, like, grassroots type performers where all of your stuff is, crowdfunded and,
Mhm.
stuff like that, you kinda gotta be really good at, um, interacting and interfacing with the people who enjoy your content,
Yeah.
and so, like, if you're an asshole, like, it probably isn't gonna work,
Yeah,
Like, you're probably not
absolutely.
gonna.
Do you feel like, you've obviously obviously seeing YouTube and seeing these types of creators, you took it to heart and have have gone on to do it yourself. Do you feel like you have that same interaction with people as well? Do you find yourself being like, I need to kind of have those same moments where I'm like, you held on to those moments as long as you did?
Yeah. No, I absolutely do. And, like, I think I don't know. I think that, like, I also have experienced now that, like, I really am very genuinely happy to ever, like, meet someone who consumes my content or, like, have people reach out on in Instagram or email or whatever, and, like, all of those interactions, I'm really, really happy to have,
Mhm.
and I wanna know more about the people, and I want to, like, have, I don't know, like, I understand that, like, people have parasocial relationships with creators, but, like, I wanna have a parasocial relationship with you, like, I wanna know who you are and the things that you like and, you know, what you're doing, what your job is, who your best friend is, what your life's like. Um So, I don't know, I definitely feel like, as a person who has consumed a lot of YouTube in my life, and met a lot of the people who create those things, whether it be at, like, a VidCon or a live show or a whatever, that, like, if those people are genuine, they stick around a lot longer because
Yeah.
because the reasons that they're doing it are genuine as well, and you're gonna burn out on not loving the thing faster.
Yeah, I do think, like, that it's so funny to hear you say, like, "I wanna have a parasocial relationship with you." Like, I wanna know about you. Because I think that YouTube world, and again, not everyone, some people were very different, and YouTube now is a very different place than YouTube was back then.
Yeah.
But one of the most lasting creators that I can think of is Philip DeFranco, um,
Yes.
who is so cool. Like, I I now I'm gonna be a little fangirly, but, I got to meet him. He did, like, a YouTube sponsored, like, live show, and
Uh-huh.
he posted, like, "If you're in the LA area and you wanna be in the, like, live audience, we need, like, this number of people to show up," and I filled out the form, like, immediately, and I remember being like, "There's no way," and then I got an email that
Yeah.
was like, "Be at this location." I was like
Oh my god!
and I was like, "Okay, I am not only on my way, but begging a friend to come with me because I don't wanna go by myself." Um,
Yeah.
and, like, so much fun. It was, like, him and I think 2 of the SourceFed guys, and
Mhm.
I, like, wore my merch and was, like, very excited to be there. And afterwards, he took pictures with everyone, which was, normal, nice thing to do. But he like, my picture was blurry, and I was like I saw it after, and I was like, "Oh, man." And my friend who didn't care about him was like, "We should just ask him to take
Right.
another picture." And I was like, "That is
Yeah.
not
The absolute
acceptable."
audacity
Yeah.
of a person who doesn't know who this is, I understand.
I was like, "You don't get it." Like, he has things to do, he has news to report, like, he doesn't have
Yeah.
time to take this picture. And and he, noticed that we hadn't left, basically, and was like,
Uh-huh.
"Was something wrong with your picture?" And I was like, "No, everything's fine." And my friend was like, "It was blurry." And he was like, "Well, we need to take another one." So, I
Oh.
have, like, 5 photos of the 2 of us in, like, various but I think it's, like, that is that genuine thing that you're like,
Mhm.
I not only do I, like, care, but I notice that something, like, there's something wrong, let me see if I can fix it,
Right.
that gives you that longevity of that
Yeah.
career. Yeah.
Yeah, or, like, I like the, Craig Benzine,
Mm.
Wheezy Waiter, who has also been around for 7 bajillion years and, like, never been really that popular, but, like, has the longevity and, like, the amount of people necessary to continue to have that longevity,
Yeah.
and it hasn't really gone past that, but, like, he's got enough people to
Yeah.
have this be his thing, and he's chill about it, you know?
Yeah.
But they did, like, a show or something, his band was playing, and they came through Salt Lake all the time, which was wild, just, like, not a normal thing, especially at that time for people to do, um, but, yeah, like, after the show, like, waiting with this line of people to take a picture with everybody and not just being like, "Okay, picture, bye," but being like, "What's your name?" You
Mm.
know, like, where like, "Oh, have you been to oh, you've been to a show you've been to a bunch of shows before? Oh, thank you so much for coming to all the shows," you know, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I just, like I like having those interactions. I feel like, people say, like, "Never meet your heroes," or whatever.
Yeah.
But I've had pretty great luck so far,
I'm,
so
like, knocking on wood so that tomorrow you don't send me an email that's
I
like, "Just
know.
so you know, I met the biggest star," and it turns out he's a total asshole.
I know, yeah, no, no, no.
No.
I I was in the most awkward I was like it was a VidCon, and I got a meet and greet, for John and Hank Green,
Mm.
and I was nearing the front of the line and realized that, like, it was a signing, and, like, you were supposed to bring something to be signed, but
Oh,
I
no.
didn't bring anything to be signed, and I was like, "It's okay, I already have so much stuff that's signed by them that I've just, like, bought."
Yeah.
So, like, I don't need them to sign anything. I just wanna say hello, and I got to the front, and I was like, "I don't have anything for you to sign, but I just wanna say hello," and they were like they were like, "We can sign your badge," and I was like, "No, it's cool, I don't need anything signed, but, like, I would love to shake your hand if that was a thing that was amenable to you," you know, like
Oh.
just absolutely losing it.
I think what's cool about that, though, is that, like, as we talk about those things where we're obviously these are really small moments in their lives, but very big moments for us. And I think what's cool is that you're kind of approaching it with that knowledge of trying to do the same thing for other people, of kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, no one if you brought that up to someone, they would be like, "Yeah, I'm sure that happened. I believe you." I
Yeah,
don't I don't remember it, but I do believe you.
yeah.
But do you it sounds like that's part of I think that's some of the best parts of, like, when you get to be a fan first and then transition into making content that you people are fans of and remembering to
Yeah.
bring that heart with you.
Yeah, and I think that also there's, like, two things to that. One, yes, like, understanding that the fan interaction is something that they're gonna keep with them for a long time, for forever,
Mhm.
and they're gonna remember that thing even if you don't. But also that, like, whatever group of people crops up around the thing that you're doing, that group of people is also kind of separate from you, and the people that are there are going to be people that are making that group thrive that are not you, and
Mm.
those people are super important. So, like, there's Nerdfighteria, but there's several people within Nerdfighteria that are, like, running message boards, or, like, doing all of these things to, like, make that community, thrive,
Mhm.
that were not John and Hank Green or a person who works for John and Hank Green, especially in the beginning when it's just, like, them and a YouTube channel.
Absolutely.
Um, and so, like, the people who are, like, working within that space to make it a great space are equally, if not more important than me,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I think a lot of people forget that sometimes. Like there's sort of a there's like a positive way to experience people being fans of you, and there's a very negative way of that, which is that it's the flip side, which is I'm the person doing all of this and therefore I'm the most important person in the world, blah blah blah. And it's negative. It's not the
Right,
truth.
right.
Like
Exactly, exactly, and hopefully those people don't have longevity because
yeah.
you're gonna get found out.
For sure, yeah, I think I
For
can
sure.
people come to mind right now
Yeah,
that was
I got a list. I got a list.
was the,
Yeah.
the Achilles heel of sorts.
It was
Yeah.
funny because I listened to the High School Musical episode with Molly Burdick, and
Uh-huh.
I listened to the, Mike Schubert episode on Bo Burnham, and I was like, "I'm like the weird amalgamation of Molly Burdick and Mike Schubert. I'm gonna talk about YouTube and musicals."
Yeah. Yeah, the thing that has been so fun about this overall has just been, especially with people who have come on that are creators themselves, getting to see sort of like the building blocks that make you a person that then says, "Let me create something and put it on the internet for free."
Yeah.
Because it is a
Because
specific
how do you
chemistry.
get there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
What
very
possesses you to
Um,
spend 5 hours after your work day every day making a thing and putting it out on the internet for free? What's wrong with you?
Yeah. But I do think, what I think is cool, I think actually about all 3 of those that you bring up, like yourself, Mike, and Molly, is that it almost seems like at some point you saw something that gave you a feeling of joy. And instead of just saying, "I want to keep experiencing this," you not only said, "I want to keep experiencing this, but I want to find a way to give someone else that same feeling." Like, I'm sure there is someone listening to your work that has the same sort of story of, "I was on my living room computer and ignoring my family and friends, and I desperately wanted to continue feeling that joy." Like, I think
Right.
yeah, it seems like there's that really cool connection of there's just something that gets sparked where you're watching someone else do something that makes you go, "Oop, nope, this is the thing that I gotta find a way to give this to people too."
Right. And you know what? That spark comes from different places for all kinds of people, and for me, it was a parody musical, very badly recorded, spanning several videos on YouTube, because at that point, your YouTube videos could only be, like, 10 minutes long or
Oh, that's
whatever.
right. Harry Potter
with a
musical part
soundtrack
18.
that you like couldn't get for several months because they had to like go into the studio and record it because like the the YouTube recording was just like not acceptable.
Yeah. Oh,
Oof.
well, I think that's actually a perfect place for us to wrap up and for me to ask you our final question, which is if you had never on your home computer watched all 207 parts of a Harry Potter musical, what would be different about you today?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think a lot would be different about me today because I don't know that I would have found my way back into the fandom and back into the fandom at a time where I was trying to figure out what I wanted to create and put out into the world.
Mm,
So, I think that, like, the timing was had to be that way. Um, and if I hadn't have done that, I don't know, I wouldn't have done Quidditch for, like, 6 years and traveled and and have all the friends I have from that, and I probably wouldn't have ended up, doing this podcast with one of my best friends and then realizing that podcasting was the thing that I wanted to be doing with my life and my time. So, I think really, really, really big implications on this one. And, I hope that that those star kids can take some joy themselves in sparking joy in somebody else.
yeah. I also hope that you can take some joy in the joy that you spark for people that sparked from Star Kids sparking joy.
We're just so sparky.
Sparkity spark spark.
I'm about to start a fire in here.
Oh, a
Yeah.
fandom fire. I love it. Keeping everyone
Fire
warm. Well, thank you so much, Sequoia, for joining me today and for sharing everything about this weird, wild journey that the internet was and it still is. I've had
Yep.
so much fun talking to you today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I had a great time. Thank you for making me go down the domino effects of my life and talk to all of my friends about it. So
Oh.
I had a great time.
Anytime. I love giving people a reason to have a crisis. So, all right. Well, thank you. And for everyone else, we will be back next week. If you'd like to hang out with me between now and then, or just let me know what you thought about this episode, you can find me on all social media at Marissa Kamari. You can also subscribe to my newsletter, which I release an issue of every week with this podcast by visiting our website, tandonproductions.com. Until next Wednesday, I hope you are enjoying what you love.